Okay, well, I just wanted to say that Ron is an advertising agency veteran and professor of marketing at the University of Albany. And he spent at least the last 5 years finding and documenting surviving ghost signs. And he's really an all-star board member. He helped me plan the Albany 30th anniversary pop-up tour in 2019, which was spectacular. And I'm sorry those members missed it, but we had a great time. So I guess if you could stay muted and put your questions in the chat, or maybe by then we'll allow you to speak again, but all right.
All set?
Yep.
All right, welcome everyone to Seeing Through Walls. This ghost sign is about 4 blocks from my office. It's a remarkable document, a living palimpsest, as we call them, with multiple layers fading into view and then disappearing again over time. This sign is historic across several dimensions, and I walked by it for years without ever noticing it. Until one day, this sign, or at least sign bit, appeared literally across the street when the wall of an abutting building was demolished. Its relative brightness and novelty was enough to make the news. And it made me want to Google Unibiz. What was Unibiz? Turns out Unibiz was bait, and I was hooked. Here's the scary thing about ghost signs. Once you see one, others start popping into existence with frightening regularity. Everywhere I went, they started jumping out. From building tops and alleyways and old commercial strips. I found 3 just down the road in Troy. Another in Cohoes, another in Newburgh, here in Albany, I'm sorry, Newburgh again, Kingston again, Lowell, Massachusetts, Newark, New Jersey. Once my eyes were opened, I could spot a fragment that had been all but painted out when passing at 30 miles an hour. I don't know if sharp eyes can just see a bee right there in Biscuit. I am now even seeing them when they aren't there. Like here in Hartford, Connecticut. I came to photograph the Royal Crown ghost, but my spidey senses said, look behind the Coors sign. And sneaking my phone into the 6-inch space revealed, you guessed it, you need a biscuit, a product of the National Biscuit Company. At first, my collection was nothing more than an undifferentiated mass, but patterns started emerging, repeats, repaints. I could almost smell it when a ghost was around the corner, and I started digging deeper into their chemistry and geography, history, and meaning. For all of you Star Trek, the original series fans, ghost signs are guardians of forever, portals in time. So let's talk a bit about their history. Relative to our cousins across the Atlantic, outdoor and display advertising actually got a late start in the United States. Billboards didn't really begin populating our landscape until after the Civil War. One scholar attributes this to a vibrant newspaper culture, which provided a fine platform for advertising. Interestingly, newspaper owners kept display advertising, pictures, etc., at bay, fearing big advertisers would swamp smaller advertisers and drive the smaller advertisers' business away. They insisted all ads be of equal font size and weight. That began to give way in the early to mid 1800s, and eventually the design of display advertising in newspapers and magazines mirrored the advertising that appeared on trade cards, posters, and city walls. What wasn't immediately obvious to me when I started on this journey, but should have been, is the fact that it takes a lot of money to advertise at building side scale. While there are many examples of one-off wayfinder and building identifiers, like this one that simply reads bank on the back of a bank in Rensselaer, New York, the majority of ghosts we see today are remnants of the country's first national advertising campaigns. I've never seen a ghost for Hood sarsaparilla, either in real life, on Pinterest, or anyplace else. But according to sources, it was among the first brands to advertise nationally. Here's Hood's Lowell, Massachusetts factory. This was patent medicine, at an industrial scale. America's pharmaceutical industry in the late 19th century was patent medicine. And just like today, it was a business that thrived on marketing. But because hoods chose as its favored canvas fences and barn sides, not brick walls, all of its outdoor faded or decayed to dust. That hasn't happened with some select ads painted on brick. Like Hood's sarsaparilla, Payne's celery compound promoted itself as an herbal remedy that just happened to be 20% alcohol. Painted ads survive because of a quirk of lead white paint, or so they say, which apparently bonded with and became part of the matrix of the brick below. Most ghosts we see today have faded to just that white bottom layer. The earliest ghosts speak of an era of advertising we associate with the 19th century. In branding terms, advertisers promoted the functional benefits of their products. Payne's made people well. Coca-Cola relieved fatigue. Ivory soap floated, useful if you're bathing in a lake or a stream. Even soft drinks and chewing gums were promoted as having functional benefits. Now, this sign's a bit hard to make out, but if you look very carefully, most people can spot this little ginger ale at the bottom. And this is part of the fun of this whole ghost sign hunt, is trying to piece these things together. They're very much like puzzles. That bottom sign actually is for Country Club Ginger Ale, and its functional benefit was it settled stomachs, as did Adams Pepsin Gum. And now that you see that, you might be able to read Adams and Pepsin and GUM right here on this ghost. Again, the functional benefits of the product. Okay. Ghost signs are part of a larger media type we today call out of home or outdoor, billboards for short. Outdoor advertising flourished initially as a medium to promote the theater and, of course, the circus. Both adventures of the imagination made bigger through advertising. The man usually credited for advertising going big was this guy, P.T. Barnum, who hung roof-to-road banners from his American Museum in New York City in the decades leading up to the Civil War. It was later in his life that he lent his name to the most famous traveling roadshow of all time. However, it took a while for us marketers of basic commodities and packaged goods, other than patent medicines and tobaccos, to catch on to the possibility of using advertising to make a kind of theater out of the purchase of consumer goods. But necessity being the mother of invention, after the American Civil War, with the rise of railroads and the removal of Native Americans, vast tracts of rich farmland opened in the Midwest. With the invention of mechanized harvesting and something called cold rolling, shelf-stable processed wheat in the form of white flour began pouring into the market. In fact, overproduction of wheat is considered to be one of the key factors that caused the Panic of 1893, a 5-year-long economic depression that was called the Great Depression until the Great Depression. Seeing opportunities, this man, Adolphus Green, trained as a lawyer, negotiated the merger in 1898 of the American Biscuit Company and the New York Biscuit Company, along with a smaller company called the United States Baking Company. He guided the patent for a mechanized method for wrapping and sealing and boxing baked goods that would be familiar to any of us who have eaten a saltine cracker. And he teamed up with this guy, F.W. Ayer, owner of arguably the first modern advertising agency in the United States, an agency that was called N.W. Ayer. Now, F.W. named the agency after his father, N.W., because he was only 21 when he founded the agency, and he didn't think anybody would take it seriously. So he called in Dad and said, "Can I name it after you?" Green and Ayer talked their newly established board of the National Biscuit Company, company we today call Nabisco, into authorizing $7 million in 1899 to promote a new product, a uniform 27 crackers to a package, sold everywhere for 5 cents product. Notice you need a biscuit. Outdoor as an industry actually dates back a couple of decades earlier to the 1870s, when bill posters first organized. By the time Green and Ayer launched the Unita Biscuit, there were already 3 major media companies capable of managing a nationwide paint campaign, 2 in Chicago and 1 in New York, Thomas Cusick, O.J. Cude, and R.J. Gunning. To get a sense of just how insane this whole thing was, take a look at this self-promotion for R.J. Gunning. See those guys down here hanging from the plank, probably several stories above the street. This was definitely a job for a daredevil. While virtually all outdoor ads painted or posted have faded, decayed, and disappeared, outdoor advertising in the first decades of the 20th century was so pornographically prolific that several thousand, almost all of them the more stable paint on brick variety, survive, though most have faded to near illegibility, which is where a little desktop archaeology comes in. My tools are simple: a car, a digital camera capable of shooting in something called RAW format, Photoshop, and Google Street View. Those 4 things are the things I turn to every day. I love this shot from Auburn, New York, which is the home of William Seward and Harriet Tubman, by the way. It's the alpha and omega of ghost signs with a nice chewy neon middle. In front is the beautiful 1951 Hunter Dynaront. But as a backdrop, we have 2 marvelous ghosts. On the right, you can see this script here in the oldest of the paint, E and W, Earl and Wilson. You can just make out Earl and Wilson up here. Earl and Wilson, Linen Collars and Cuffs, a company that was founded in Troy, New York in 1867, a generally unheralded early national brand. I've seen E&W ghosts from as far south as Waco, Texas. And this sign probably dates from the mid 1890s, I would guess. On the left, barely visible, barely readable, but obvious once you see it, is the ghost of FAYS here, Phase Drugs, a business that wasn't incorporated until 1966. This ghost, probably from the 1970s, is among the last of its kind. And note its condition. It's just 50 years old, and it has already almost entirely chipped away. Overpaintings versus the original underpainting white signs decay really fast. A few ghosts or ex-ghosts have been made once again very visible, repainted, some say restored, some say ruined, to help quaintify a downtown. In our imaginations, these ads represent a more authentic, more artisanal period. More beautiful to me are ghosts only recently exposed and easily mistaken as restored. These ghosts, when uncovered, are novel enough to make the news. Often, they're not complete, like this example from North Salina Street in Syracuse. You can see the tar up here delineating the old roof line of the building that once abutted and protected this sign. This tiny bit of red at the right is actually the bottom of the Nabisco logo. Actually, at the time the sign was originally painted, that logo read in seal, not Nabisco, referencing Adolphus Green's patent on packaging. And originally, as you'll see if you look really carefully, there were 2 logos, 2 Nabisco logos, one on the right here, and one you can just make out that little Nabisco kind of TV aerial here on top of the oval on the left. The obliteration of everything above the tar line here gives you a good idea of just how gone most of the ghosts of this era are. This sign has since been restored, making it a nice decorative addition to the gentrifying neighborhood. Unfortunately, as is often the case, the restorers got many things wrong. Wrong color, wrong logo, lost logo, some crude letter rendering, and kind of most sinfully ended up obscuring quite a bit of history. Better as a restoration, I think, is this example a couple of blocks to the south, where one of 2 Day Motor Company signs was left in its original weathered state, while its twin here was restored. The signs I've come to prize display their history and welcome analysis. This gold medal from Oneonta, New York, tells an interesting overtime story, decipherable when you stare at it long enough. The original layer was this large gold medal in the background, which you can only see the G and the M on the left, okay? Over top of that, a smaller, still large, but smaller gold medal was painted, probably in response to zoning restrictions that started coming online in the 1920s. The whole wall was then allowed to weather a bit, so both the new sign and the old sign began to, again, kind of reveal themselves, and then the whole thing was covered up by a wall abutting it, which has since been demolished and, again, exposed the sign. Similarly, in Amsterdam, New York, an older large gold medal was painted out by a now oxidized layer in favor of a small gold medal, which, like so many overpaintings, has now mostly chipped away. So you can see the large one quite obviously. The new one and the smaller one is just revealed by a couple of little paint specks here and here. At the top of all gold medal ghosts from the era, you'll see the word eventually. You can see it clearly here at the top, but you can also see a little bit of it just above metal in a larger sign. Eventually, this campaign, Eventually Gold Medal, Why Not Now, was created in 1907 by a guy by the name of Benjamin Bull, a company marketing executive at Gold Medal. It was the just do it of its day, and a campaign that would run into the 1950s. Because the word cuts across the horizontal and vertical brick matrix, it stands out, even when mostly chipped away. On this wall from Watervliet, New York, which when you first look at it is completely indecipherable, we can read a raging battle actually between Sarasota flour, the bottom layer, which is barely readable, beginning with this big C over here, and it reads Sarasota with the lowercase a over here. So the bottom layer is readable with that big C, and gold medal, which is now mostly flaked off, but you can see the eventually just above the C flaking off into illegibility. This marvel from Keene, New Hampshire was painted at least 3 times, and its repainting reveals very subtle changes to the script logo font used by Coca-Cola, particularly in the thinning of the initial C, which you can see in the 2 black layers at the top. Coca-Cola was very particular about its logo. They would send out Ponce patterns to painters. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's the same technique that fresco painters used to use, where they'd put up a big sheet of paper that had the logo perfectly rendered on it with little pinholes in it, and they would put it up on the wall and ponce it with kind of a dust, and then pull that back and then fill in and connect the dots, literally. A little north in Concord, New Hampshire, we see how prized outdoor locations were battled over by brands. Coca-Cola, in this case, trumped gold medal, but that was only after gold medal first trumped Coca-Cola. And how do we know that? By using a technique I'll detail here in a bit that allows us to kind of X-ray these signs. With the X-ray, if you look carefully just above the word metal and gold medal, you can see the top of an older Coca-Cola, revealed mostly by the L and the A, right above the L in metal. Hope you can see that. On this wall in southwestern Pennsylvania, our eyes are drawn immediately to the bright whites, genuine, smoking tobacco, which are both clues for those of us in the know to the existence of the barely visible Bull Durham, which runs across the middle of this wall. And the word bull is just above smoking. It's kind of a dark gray on the brick background. A good-sized wall on a street with high traffic would often invite brands to battle and multiple repaintings during outdoors' pretty brief 20-year high period. And we can read some very interesting commercial history into the layers. Here, Wrigley's, if you can see it over the word owl over the OW in owl because it cuts diagonally. It's pretty easily to spot. And all you have to do is look at Richard's photo there to get a sense of what it looked like. Here, Wrigley's replaced owl cigars. Here, although it's tough to read, Unita Biscuit actually replaced ivory. Now, ivory was the bottom layer on this sign, so it's the one that bonded with the brick. But you can see biscuit if you look carefully under the S. Right under the S, you'll see a B, which is the first letter of the word biscuit. And you'll have to have an awfully good resolution screen to be able to see the very faint Nabisco logo that overlays the O and the R in the word ivory at the top. Here, on this wall in Northampton, Northampton, Massachusetts, you can see Unita Biscuit pretty clearly on the left-hand side, but when we x-ray it, we can see this other ghost for something called Purcell, which was a laundry detergent, which was briefly marketed in the United States right around 1910, 1915. And so Purcell beat Unita in this case, but on the other side of this wall, Purcell was trumped, if you can see it, by Wrigley's Spearmint. Ghosts were commonly painted and painted over and then painted out when contracts expired. Fortunately, that outpainting, when it was painted over, often served as a protective layer. Here, chipping back into view, you can just read the word best right in the middle. And that suggests a Pillsbury Best ghost once inhabited this wall. But if you look really carefully, if your ghost hunter eyes are getting trained, you'll actually see a Coca-Cola also on this wall. For this work, Photoshop is my indispensable go-to, with the black and white layer mask being by far the most useful tool. By fussing with the component channels of the color image, it is also, fussing with the color channels, the component channels of the color image is also quite useful. Dr. Ken Jones, our country's most avid ghost hunter, you may be familiar with him, has published a short video describing a technique he's used to help archaeologists separate the layers of prehistoric pictographs and how he's applied that technique to separating the layers of ghosts. Another key is to shoot in camera raw format, like I said before, so that the camera doesn't throw away any data. And a wide angle lens is also absolutely indispensable. This building is about a block from my youngest son's first apartment. I discovered it via Google Street View one night when I was trying to find his building's address. The alley to the right of the bakery is less than 3 feet wide, but I was able to squeeze in, take 64 separate photos by simply walking from left to right down the wall and aiming my camera up a little bit with each pass. And after 5 hours of painstakingly twisting and matching those shots in Photoshop, I was able to assemble this composite. And after a few more hours of fussing, I actually put it together rather nicely. And when we x-ray it, some of the words become clear. It says delicious, delightful. Down at the bottom, we can read font or fount and bottles and 5 cents. And if I overlay a period Pepsi logo, you'll see actually this whole ghost was Pepsi-Cola, probably from around 1915. Here's a modern variant of the word Pepsi-Cola or the logo Pepsi-Cola to help you pick it out. Sometimes all it takes is the Photoshop black and white filter. This X-ray technique works miracles at times, like on this Rexall wall from Chattagay, New York. I really kind of love some of the words on this wall, like sick room supplies and toilet articles. And very barely, I was able to make out these words on the diagonal, which actually say developing. But many times conjuring a ghost to legibility requires research, guesswork, and a bit of luck, and some fair amount of imagination. Most people can see this sign in Troy, New York, and pick out the word fish all the way at the right in yellow at the top. What does that mean? No amount of filtering has ever allowed me to peer beneath the vines on this wall. So I turned to Google, and that turned up this. Okay, and that helped me solve this problem. That's actually a ghost sign promoting George's codfish. Troy is on a river, it's kind of a river culture, food stuff, I guess. And these ghost signs for me are very much puzzles. They're teetering right there on the edge of legibility and loss. And putting all the pieces together can reveal some very interesting history. On the 30th anniversary tour that Michael mentioned at the head of this presentation, which we took on the anniversary of the SCA's original tour of Albany, we stopped by this old warehouse on Broadway in Albany. Down through the band in the middle is an almost indecipherable sign. But combining the techniques that I've just talked about, I was able to stitch together the band that runs down the center of the south wall. And you can pick out some words pretty easily. It says Clyde Automobile Company here, and motor trucks. And any motorhead in our group will be able to know what that is right there. Right in the middle is an old GMC logo. Its goofy script logo, I can confirm and pretty much date to right around 1910, 1915 by referencing these kind of old ads. On the north wall, since we already know what the south wall says, we can start picking out words pretty easily. Motor, truck here, Clyde, automobile again, but there's a word right at the beginning under the first set of green doors here, which begins, it's some kind of script letter. Is that a P? Is that an R? Is it an S? Well, my brother-in-law is a real car guy, had a list of truck brands from 1900 to 1920, and he just went down through it, and we discovered that what that sign said was Rapid. This is probably the only outdoor Rapid promotion in existence. It was a short-lived brand that was eventually purchased by GMC in 1910. Common words also help me conjure legibility. Fourth only to eventually Coca-Cola and the word tobacco is the word furniture. No great surprise. The big walls of big downtown furniture stores were natural canvases for promoting the big goods inside. Furniture has offered me the key necessary to unlock a lot of very nearly gone ghosts. I spotted this wall in Albany after parking on a side street to join friends at a Central Avenue Chinese restaurant. There's just enough there. There was just enough there to let me know it said something. Okay. After some staring, the word carpets, you probably won't be able to see it yourself, but on the right side of the back wall, the words carpets revealed itself. And I know from seeing a lot of these ghosts that the word carpets is often associated with furniture. So I started walking around this building, and from an alternate angle, I could see on the back that it actually had the name of the store, John B. Huff. And I could look that up in old newspapers and see that John B. Huff was indeed a furniture store. And without even seeing it, when I took the photo, there was this, I'm not quite sure how my pronunciation is correct, but the trompe-l'oeil lace curtain sign, which I've yet to get close enough to photograph. This sumac tree here in the front's actually grown up, and I can't get on the roof of this halfway house next door. As a matter of fact, they've kind of chased me away a couple of times and think I'm a crazy man when I say, can I get on your roof? Please go away. Okay, so how far am I willing to push this? And how far am I willing to travel to perhaps acquire nothing? Okay. Honestly, sometimes it's not until I get back and I put the photo into Photoshop and start fussing around with it, whether I see I've got anything or not. Okay. I spotted this wall, which is all but washed away in Norwood, New York, which is way up by the Canadian border, flying around one night via Google Street View. My now trained eye spotted very, very, very faintly in the left-hand side of this sign, a Wrigley's pack, cutting diagonally, very much like Richard's photo does. And even on my computer, I could see there were lots of other faded bits on this wall. So I gambled on a 4-hour drive through the Adirondacks. I started filtering it when I got back. One filter, probably the bottom layer, revealed, well, there's clearly words on this wall. What do they say? And that word furniture helps me, because in the upper right-hand side, you can see URE very clearly, right? And putting that together, that's furniture and music store. Okay, furniture and music store. Filtering it a different way, So there's furniture and music store. Filtering it a different way, I come up with another furniture, which is kind of where the first furniture is, except down a line. You can see, again, the URE right above the window on the right. And then a lot of just staring and thinking and imagining and searching ended up helping me reveal the name of this store. There was a furniture store in Norwood, New York called George L. Shepard. And if you look very carefully, you can see the top line here reads George L. Shepard, who happened to have a fire in 1920, by the way, and had a fire sale. And if piecing all of these together over time, using Photoshop, using the text on Photoshop, I was able to decipher all of these words on the side. And then filtering it a third time revealed another list on the left and kind of a figure, I think, holding a trumpet. And that was another list of furniture. Okay, all right. There's another word on this wall. I think it says garish, but I have no idea what that means. Okay, so I think I might be making that up. However, I did find an ad from about 1890 that was promoting something called brown sarsaparilla. And in it is mentioned a Mr. Garish. So I'm kind of maybe wishfully thinking that that's what this sign says. Okay, and all of that takes us to this amazing display in Gloversville, New York. We actually have documentation that shows this wall was first rented as ad space in 1892. Somebody by the name of Manager Gott. Now, Manager Gott was the manager of the local theater. But the wall pretty quickly attracted bigger interests. A black and white filter helps us spot the Pillsbury promo right away. And to its right, nearly gone, but decipherable if you look at it long enough, is a Coca-Cola. There's also another word that kind of jumps out on this wall, and it's right behind that kind of half moon shape. It's right below that, and it's right here. And the first letter's P-N-E. You know, there aren't many English words that start with that. Alice, do you know what that word is? You're muted. I can see your lips moving now. It's pneumatic, right? Right? Pneumatic. Pneumatic. And if that's pneumatic, there are probably some other words associated with it. It took me forever to figure that out. But pneumatic, cushion, and solids. Pneumatic, cushion, and solids were types of tires. You know, before pneumatic tires took over, you had a choice if you had a car in 1910. So that's probably an old Firestone ad. On the lower left, staring at this, all of a sudden emergent is Gloversville Garage. So we have that Firestone ad. We have something for Klein, which I believe was a tailor on Main Street in Gloversville. We have these signs, which I've tried to restore to something like their original color, Pillsbury Coca-Cola, Gloversville Garage. There was also, at one point, this entire wall was painted out promoting something called Glove City Chevrolet Company. But there's one more ghost on this wall, a very important one. And I'm wondering if anybody can see the clue. We've actually already seen it in Pennsylvania. The very top, underneath the kind of ridging at the top of this roof, you can see the word genuine. And if you remember, that genuine's associated with the brand Bull Durham. If we x-ray that carefully, you can see on either side of that upper window, there's a little quote mark, a big B, a big U, there's an L and an L, and a couple of quotes. That's Bull Durham, which was probably the base layer of this wall. And if there's Bull Durham as words on the wall, there's probably the illustration of a bull somewhere on this wall, because all Bull Durham signs had a big bull in a field. And if you look very carefully, there's this kind of very subtle shift in reds behind the jar that's below the Pillsbury Best. And there's where the bull was. So revealed here for the first time since about 1900 is the full sign in close to its original glory. Okay, all good. But what does any of it mean? Okay, well, any unexplored primary document set is a treasure for historians. As I've already suggested, I've written about how ghosts describe a period in advertising history when marketers moved away from positioning via functional benefits, like relieves fatigue, to positioning via emotional benefits, which is what we in the profession do every day now. Elsewhere, I have explored the move towards sans serif fonts as a response to the imperatives of trying to paint letters against bricks. I've also written about how Dada, anybody familiar with the art movement, Dada? I think it's actually a response to an ironic aesthetic response to the decay that was already happening by 1915 of all these different layers of ghosts. Here are some other thoughts and ghost signs that ghost signs have triggered for me. Ghost x-rays show a very common pattern. Tobacco ghosts, it's a little hard to read, but the word liberty starting with B is visible here when we x-ray this sign, whereas the real light version of this currently reads owl, cigar, 5 cents. More common, we see, again, we can see liberty. If you look at the top, you can see the R and the T and the Y pretty clearly at the right. But the top layer now looks like this. And if we look up E. Winter, which is clearly visible at the top, we find out that E. Winter was a retailer of pianos and organs, a consumer good, a household good. Here, Liberty in New Canaan, Connecticut, I've forgotten where I shot this, was actually painted twice. You can see Liberty kind of transposed over itself. But on top of that was painted our good friend Gold Medal Flower. And here in Poughkeepsie, we have Liberty again, overpainted with our best friend, You Need a Biscuit. So what does all that mean? I'm really interested and have written about how ghost signs track the rise of national brands as a replacement of locally produced goods and services. Related, and something that has become clearer to me only as I've prepared this presentation, I think ghosts hint at another big story, specifically the shift in marketing that started from targeting men to targeting women, which happened across the country simultaneously, all at once at the turn of the last century. Now, the ghosts of our imaginations, which we reproduce today to signal artisanal quality and authentic nature, are intricate and quaint, faded remnants perhaps of our imagined Edenic agrarian past. But in fact, the rise of outdoor advertising traces the rise of national homogenizing brands. What started with beer, and then later tobacco, patent medicines gave way almost immediately to household commodities like flour. This one's a little hard to read. It's in Plattsburgh, New York, but the bottom word people can usually pick out. The whole phrase says Duluth Imperial Flour from about 1895. Then there's Gold Medal. Here's one from Middletown, New York that was painted twice with 2 different Gold Medal campaigns, with eventually being the top one. Here's one for Sarasota flour. So consumer packaged goods, again, sold to women. And here we have in Boston, the Quaker Oats promotion. Now it's a little tough to read all of these, but if I put the Quaker man next to it, you'll see on this left-hand side of this building, he was rendered in his full Quaker man glory on that building side. And I want you to take a particular note of what's in his hand. He not only has a box of Quaker Oats in his right hand, in his left hand, he's holding a scroll with the word pure. I've written about this before as well. Ghosts help us trace the growing dominance of promotional messaging built around the concepts of purity, cleanliness, and hygiene. Here, this Wrigley sign says, every package tightly sealed. Marketers made sure to hammer their unique selling proposition. Factory made in the Midwest, untouched by immigrant hands, floating free of the dirty world. Marketers were happy to exploit a public panic around germs that were then only recently discovered, and immigration, which was then peaking, and also unselfconsciously amplify messaging built around the concept of what we today call the lost cause, which posited that the Civil War was about states' rights, not slavery, and that Black Americans, if no longer slaves, were and remained happy servants. And you don't have to travel hours and do major excavations to see these servant mascots. They're still on our walls today. Up until last year, they were still on our pancake mixes. If you look at your Uncle Ben's rice or your cream of wheat cereal, you'll find them yet. In the first decade of the 20th century, outdoor got out of hand. 5-story ad displays were common. Look, on this one in Chicago, all our favorites are here. There's beer here with Miller High Life. There's a theater down here. There's tobacco. There's Coca-Cola. And if you look in the upper right, you can just barely make out the first letters of Unita Biscuit. The medium's explosion was comic. And there was pushback almost immediately with this headline from 1899 talking about the poor art students who'll be put out of business if regulators regulate the painting of ghost signs. Ghost signs faded from our landscape actually a lot earlier than we imagine. Okay, here in 1957, if you look at that building in the upper right, you can see a Coca-Cola sign that has been painted out and is actually coming back and fading back into existence. So that sign was probably painted in the 30s and was already considered an antique 60 years ago. Nothing lasts. I throw this one in here. It's not a true ghost, but you can just barely read the words Saturday Matinee. It's from a mall in Maine, I believe. I throw this in here because in my former life as a creative director at an advertising agency for a company called Transworld Entertainment, I named this store. I designed its logo. I designed its storefront, which I guess makes me now kind of a ghost. All right. As ads, ghosts are not prioritized for preservation. The Unibis ghost that got us started here was demolished not long after its discovery. Just prior to that, 2 other Schenectady ghosts lost their lives to parking lots. You can see a really nice Coca-Cola here in the background. What's a little less visible up here is a Unita Biscuit. Fortunately, Google Street View kind of preserves some of these ghosts in amber. If I'm in Street View looking at these signs from across the street, I can still see them. But if I cross the street, they disappear. So Google doesn't like take photos of everything every year. By next year, these will probably be gone for good. All right. So I'm not sure I honestly care about preserving ghosts. Losing a ghost is definitely losing a part of history, but part of their history is the fact that they fade and decay. As quaint relics, ghosts are pretty well documented, but without the context necessary to slot them into a historical matrix. So it's actually difficult to do research using all these Pinterest photos. Dr. Ken Jones, who I mentioned before, has assembled an amazing database, an amazing collection of about 8,000 high-resolution images. But his database has not been updated in a couple of years and is currently suffering from some technical difficulties. Duke, on the other hand, Duke University has a wonderful interactive archive and has made its large collection of period photos, billboards, neon signs, and other advertising ephemera publicly available. Still, there's nothing like the thrill of finding the real thing. As more and more documented examples meet the wrecking ball and undocumented examples fade into complete illegibility, fortunately for us, ghosts do not go that easily into that good night. Here we have Unita Biscuit ghost. You can see it kind of faded in the upper back behind these soldiers returning from World War I in 1918. You can see that Unita Biscuit sign was originally light letters against a dark background. That was a dark green background with white letters originally. And here it is today. Oddly, dark letters on a light background. How is that? Why is that? It's because at some point, this entire wall was painted out. It was painted out white. But that sign underneath refuses to stay buried. Okay, and it's now throwing off its overpainting, determined to reappear and haunt us for another 120 years. All right, that brings me to the end. Hope you enjoyed that show. And if you have any questions, Michael will read them from the chat and I'll be happy to answer them.
Well, there's some comments. I don't know if you can see.
Okay.
Back. Oh. Well, somebody said they have a great You Need a Biscuit ghost sign in Clarksville, Tennessee on an 1840s building. And
Yeah, the first You Need a Biscuits were painted probably around 1900. The teaser campaign went up in 1899.
Jeff Klein wants to swap Bob Higgins stories.
I got a few. I can tell you a little squirrel story, Jeff. How do you know Bob, the late Bob Higgins? Feel free to unmute yourself, Jeff.
Yeah, I worked for Record Town for a while.
Did you really? Where?
In Guilderland, actually. And
Guilderland? Okay, yeah.
And my dad worked at BG, which was one of the other distributor in that part of the world.
Oh yeah, sure.
So we go back with Bob.
That's funny.
Gary Arnold was probably there when you were there as well.
Yeah, Gary Arnold's is the one that hired me, actually. Yeah.
Sorry, it's a digression. I'll go back to
Okay, very good.
Len asked, what were the economics of painting on homeowners' walls?
Yeah, so building owners got a very modest fee. I think it varied a little bit, but it was like $50 a year. I don't know. I would imagine prized wall space went for more. It's like billboards today. You know, the better the location, the more you pay for it. And until 1917, when the Supreme Court ruled that communities could actually regulate their lines of sight, there was no regulation that stopped a building owner from painting on the public facing side of a building he owned, because he could say, it's my building, I can do whatever I want.
Hey, Ron, I'm having trouble finding the, I was typing something in the chat box and it sort of disappeared on me.
Go ahead.
Do you have any recommendations for a good source to review this, the Photoshop filters to, with the digital to expose these things?
Yeah, I mean, I would point you to Dr. Ken Jones's video on his website, AmericanGhosts.com. It's the technique. I've used the technique. His technique is very detailed and multi-step. I have found that simply opening up a photo and putting a black and white, just adding a black and white layer and then fussing, usually with just the red and the yellow components of that black and white layer, reveal what's revealable oftentimes. But he'll go through and do all kinds of, pretty complicated playing with the color channels.
Have you experimented with filtering the lens when shooting the picture?
I have not. I'm kind of afraid of doing that because I never know what I'm actually shooting.
That's part of the surprise.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and frankly, I'm not skilled enough as a photographer to know what.
Somebody said.
So Ken Jones' website was American Ghosts.
It should be AmericanGhosts.com, I believe.
.com. Okay.
Yeah.
Any ghost signs maintained as ghosts, stabilizing the remaining paint as opposed to repainting?
Yeah, I should have looked up the name of the team. There's a team of two guys right now who are, there are actually a couple of ghost, quote unquote, restorers or ghost stabilizers out there who are doing a really nice job of bringing ghosts back to a state of legibility without destroying, without overpainting them entirely. And they do it, one does it by applying like a 60% color wash to the outside, to the sign. So you can still kind of see through the restoration to the original but it brings enough of the detail back so that the community goes, hey, that's interesting enough so that I want to keep it. But even, you know, I'm a snob about this stuff. I've hardly ever seen a repainting that doesn't bother me because it's actually destroying the history of the thing. But I can understand why you might do it if it's the choice between doing that and losing the thing to the wrecking ball.
Were you familiar with the signs that were being painted in Manhattan and Brooklyn about 25, 35 years ago, which were all spoof signs on buildings?
Oh yeah, they show up. Yeah, there's actually actually one of the problems that some of these databases have is that some movies have painted ghost sign or painted like signs on the sides of buildings as part of their set dress.
Right.
In fact, just down the street here in Troy, they were just filming something called The Gilded Age over the last month. HBO was, and they were putting up all kinds of period signs, many of which are going to stay and end up in databases of people who say they're originals. So you do have to be careful about that for sure.
Theirs were pretty blatantly phony. I mean, there was things like, I think there was one on for dinnerware, like, talking about how great dinnerware was in your home, with plates and things.
It's funny.
Denise said, you mentioned lead paint. When did the counter effects become known?
I don't know. When I think it was pretty well known pretty early, like cigarettes were bad for you. That, you know, lead paint was bad for you in any concentration, but these itinerant painters, it wasn't like the first priority. You know, they weren't going to live into an age when the lead poisoning would be a problem anyway. They were going to die of cigarettes or something else before that. I don't know when. I know we got lead out of gasoline, and not until the 70s, right? I don't know when it left paint, but I think it was not until just then. Somebody here might know the answer better than I.
Someone said Mooresville, North Carolina has a program to restore ghost signs and adds murals based on historic signage as part of their downtown revitalization. Take a look and see what you think.
I will. Thank you.
And Joe Marlin asked, did Coke stop using release fatigue in response to a change in federal drug laws? I tried to query them, but got no response.
That's a really good question, Joe. I don't know the answer. I've asked it myself because they have delicious and refreshing and release fatigue everywhere simultaneously. And it looks like they used both those taglines in kind of an overlapping fashion into the 20s and 30s. And if that's the case, then they weren't being pressured because of the Pure Food and Drug Act, which is what, 1906, right? But that that Pure Food and Drug Act was definitely the thing that stopped the patent medicine industry from making all of these, you know, kind of spurious claims. But it also opened the door for marketers. They suddenly realized that promoting their brands, you know, by attacking your emotions rather than attacking your head, you know, rather than attacking a functional benefit, but saying, I can be a better person if I buy this thing. I can join the middle class if I buy this thing. That was a much more powerful way to get people to buy stuff. So it turns out that the Pure Food and Drug Act actually spurred advertising to actually get into our heads even more. Guilty as charged, by the way, but yeah.
I just have a comment about your comment about the integrity of restoring these signs, because I feel like you do that. You know, it was history, it happened. If it's there, we appreciate it, but to bring it back almost falsifies it. And I don't want to create a controversy here, but it's almost like the Civil War statues, you know, the statues of all the great Civil War heroes. That was history. That is what happened. It, you know, history is a snapshot in time, and we're looking at it from this vantage point. So there's a whole, you know, philosophical and moral debate that could go on about that. But I happen to agree with you that, you know, we're lucky enough to see them as they were. To bring them back almost is garish, in my opinion.
I think you have to have kind of an aesthetic of decay, which I think most of us here do. I mean, we wouldn't be interested in all this old sign shit, if we didn't love the fact that things break and things decay and things disappear, and the relics that are left speak to a history. It's why did that little piece of a city's, commercial culture survive when everything else has been, plowed under 3 times, but it's interesting, but, I mean, we can't argue too much about preservation because there are plenty of good reasons to preserve some things. But I think in the world of commercial history or commercial archaeology, I kind of lean towards documentation of the history of it. That includes the documentation of the decay. But these are all arguable in the specific. When you're looking at specific instances, like that Day Motor Company one I saw in Syracuse, I thought that was a really novel approach to restoration, which was leave half of it, restore half of it, so that you can almost like see the old half anew and see the new half and begin to appreciate what was there. So, as an educational experience, I was actually okay with that.
Len said a painter in 1985 who started in 1938 said painters wanted to stop using lead paint both because of health and because they felt there were more repaint jobs with non-lead paint. And Phil Thomason says, have you ever seen a Lydia Pinkham's
Good
vegetable
question.
paint?
I'm not sure. Have you? Lydia Pinkham is like a subject of really present research interest for me. So who asked that question? Can you unmute?
Phil Thomason.
Still here? That's too bad. I don't know if anybody knows who else knows who Lydia Pinkham was, but Richard, you know?
Yeah, Lydia Pinkham
Is that
was
back in
worked
medicine?
out of Lynn, Mass, and was a major force in patent medicines, many of which contained a fair amount of alcohol.
Yeah, they all did. They all did. I mean, they had a certain amount of relief because of the alcohol. I mean, you took it and it kind of relieved whatever, Lydia, but she was super innovative in being she was like the social media queen before we ever saw social media. She used the women's word of mouth network, unlike anybody before, or frankly, since, to be able to promote her product. She would answer, even after she died, she would answer people's letters personally. She had an entire staff that was doing this. I just saw this last weekend in an antique shop, as a matter of fact, a crate with Lydia Pinkham, the Lydia Pinkham logo on it. I think it's
this is Phil, and I've never seen one as a go sign. So just very curious about that.
Yeah, I'm pretty well, I mean, it's hard because I don't know that we have a real representative sample of ghosts surviving. We have ghosts that survive from the very prolific brands, but ones that like hoods that only painted on barn sides typically, or fences typically, there's nothing surviving, even though evidently they were unavoidable in the late 1800s. But I would hazard to guess that the Lydia Pinkham Company used alternate word of mouth marketing, almost a social media kind of marketing, rather than traditional paid media marketing like outdoor advertising. I think they're a case study in how marketing was done and is done, and not was done in this industrial period in between. What's your interest in Lydia Pinkham, Phil?
I've just got a few of the original bottles with the labels on them, and have looked for these the other ghost signs that are out there. I've just never seen one.
Yeah, me neither. Okay, Michael.
All right, one more, and then
I'm sorry. In one of your slides, you had a sign that said Madam X. Was that a show, or was that a, you know, it was a one of those conglomeration signs?
Yeah. So that was that was on the Hippodrome in New York City. So it was one of 50 signs on the side of that building promoting shows that were upcoming. It's great. It's quite fun to look at those because all the titles for all those shows prior to the Hays Code were all scandalous as hell. Wife for hire and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Okay, I've heard some instances here in Texas of the Dr. Pepper Company participating in the restoration of some of their ghost signs. I'm told they provide info on the original paint and patterns, but haven't confirmed. Do you know of any instances of this happening recently with other corporate ghost signs?
Yeah, I know Coke has supported a couple of these efforts as well, including what is purported to be the original one. I'm just guessing. Does anybody know? I think it's in Charlottesville, but I'm not sure. But I have not heard of many companies saving. It's pretty rare to come across, the original materials that were used in the making of signs. I think people that do neon know this as well, that, sometimes you can run in, you can steal all the materials from a sign company that's going out of business, but these itinerant painters would get, from what I understand, somebody here might know better than me, they would get big sheets of paper with these ponce holes kind of, and they would cut them up and they would put them against the building wall. They would ponce the thing, and then all the paper just got crumpled and thrown away. So I don't know that we have much evidence other than word of mouth. And these guys were not documentarians. They were, basically eking out a living with a lead paint can strapped around their neck. So somebody might know better than I know. Coke, Dr. Pepper's interesting.
Okay. Well, next month, July 14th, we have Stephanie Stuckey, third generation CEO of Stuckey's, and she's going to share her journey to bring back the iconic roadside retail chain founded by her grandfather, including never before published images of early stores and discussion of the evolution of the store's design and architecture. And also, if you're interested in more ghost signs, there's an exhibit at the Neon Museum of Philadelphia. And I have a link for tickets. 7 photographers capture faded wall art ads. And I can send this chat to Ron, so he'll see all the accolades and comments. I think that's all. It's after 9. I can't keep him. I have to get on with his life.
I'm more than happy to chat with people as they want to. If you want to email me, go ahead. It's ron@postmarketing.com, POSTMKTG. You can also contact me through the SCA. Enjoyed meeting all of you this evening, and have a good night.
Okay.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good
Thanks,
night.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Ron. Enjoyed it very much.
All right. Super good.
Good to see
Thanks.